Valotic everyone, it's me again, Penny, and I don't know if y'all notice, I got a mic. So I tried to do a video last week, and I forgot to turn the mic on. So it was just a bunch of me talking and no sound, and that was very traumatizing. I guess I could have dubbed over it with a bunch of bullshit, but I don't know. I decided to redo the video. We're going to be reading out of Alaskan Igloo Tales. The first story we're going to read is called The Wicked Mother. A woman, her son, and daughter once lived all alone by the sea. The daughter was still a little girl, but the son was a strong young man and an excellent hunter. He never failed to bring home a caribou whenever he went hunting. But the mother was a very lazy person. Instead of being glad when her son brought home a deer, it made her angry, for it meant that she would have to cut it up, cook the meat, and tan the hide. And then she would have to make thread of the sinew and sew parkas and other things from the hide. Every deer that he killed meant more work for her, so at last she thought of a way to put an end to his hunting. That night, when he was asleep, the wicked woman took fine ashes and poured them into his eyes. Damn. In the morning, when he awoke, he was blind, although he could not understand how it happened. The poor boy grieved about the loss of his sight for a long time, but the mother was glad, for now she had nothing to do all day long. Except look at her blind fucking son that she raised since birth. Okay. One day, a great white bear crawled on top of their igloo and broke the window with one blow of his paw. He would have come in and eaten the people, for he was hungry, but the young man called to his mother to throw a noose round the bear's front legs. This she did, and then the boy shot at the bear with his bow. The first shot missed, but at the second shot the bear fell dead. The mother skinned the bear and cooked some of the meat, but refused to give her son a bit. All she would give him was seal oil, and not much of that. But the little sister would always watch her chance to feed her brother when mother was not looking, so he did not suffer from hunger. Where that cough came from. It's weird. Winter passed, and summer followed the brief spring. We have a really brief spring. So it's like winter, slush, mosquito season, fall time, which is the best fucking season in Alaska. It's beautiful. And it's so short too. It's like a couple of weeks long. And then fucking 9 months of harsh, crazy, blistering winter. One day, the son asked his mother for a piece of bear meat. "It's all gone," said the wicked mother, and gave him some seal oil instead. But in the storm shed, Honeychuck, there was still much bear meat. Then she took little daughter and went out to pick berries. Salmon berries, heather berries, cranberries, and blueberries now covered the tundra. What the fuck are heather berries? When they had filled their baskets, they carried them home. The young man asked his mother for some berries. So she put a handful of them on a wooden plate and then sprinkled them over with bugs and worms. When the boy started to eat them, he felt the worms in his mouth and spit them out. However, he held his temper and didn't mention it to his mother. But the little sister had seen everything. And when her mother was cooking bear meat for herself, she took a piece when the woman was not looking and hid it. After lunch, they went out to pick more berries. They had gone only a short distance when the little girl said, "Mother, I have forgotten my basket. May I run back to get it?" So where I'm from, berry buckets are called amaks. The mother replied, "Yes, but go quickly." The little sister ran back to the igloo, and then taking the piece of meat she had hidden, gave it to her blind brother. He thanked her for her kindness, and she picked up her basket and ran to catch up to her mother. That afternoon, the blind boy went out and crawled on top of the igloo to enjoy the warm sunshine. And while he was sitting there, he heard a loon singing, and it seemed to say, "Come here, come here, come here." The young man climbed down and walked out across the tundra, guided by the loon's voice. The big diving bird was standing on the beach, and when the blind boy came near it, it said, "You jump on my back." The lad got on the loon's back, and they started off through the water. Lad? I mean, who wrote this? Edward L. Keithon. I'm guessing you're like English or something? The lad got on the loon's back, and they started off through the water. When they got to a deep place, the loon said, "I'm going to dive 4 times. Tell me if you are drowning." How do you tell someone you're drowning? Blind boy held on firmly, and the loon dived deep into the sea. When it came up, the boy opened his eyes. He could see the light. The loon dived again, and when it came to the surface, the boy could see a short distance. The 3rd time it dived, the boy could see almost as well as before his blindness. When he came up from the 4th plunge into the sea, his sight was completely restored. The loon carried him back to the beach, where the boy thanked him again and again. When the young man returned to the igloo, he saw that there was plenty of meat left. There was baskets full of nice, clean berries, no worms. He thought for a time, and then he came to the conclusion that it was his own mother who had blinded him and tried to slowly starve him. So he lay down, closed his eyes, and waited for her to return. When she finally came in, he weakly asked for food, and she took some berries and put them in a wooden dish. But just as she was in the act of sprinkling them with worms, he jumped up and said, You had better eat those berries yourself. I saw you put worms on them." When the wicked mother heard this, she tried to escape, but the man held her. After a while, he said, "We must go down by the sea and hunt for seal." But it was not a seal that he wanted. He caught a white whale, tied his mother on its back, and let it go. The wicked woman was probably punished justly, but thereafter, whenever the boy would go hunting, he would see her ride past on the back of the whale, and he would feel sorry for her. After all, it was his mother. I know sometimes you feel that way about your mom, but it's okay. I love you, Mom. No, she doesn't watch my videos, but love you. The next story is called A Ghost Story from Wales. And Wales is one of the villages around Nome, so it's like one of these ones. Before white men came to Alaska, the Eskimo lived very differently than they do now. In those days, when a boy became 14 or 15 years old, he had to leave his home and go live with the other boys in a large igloo called a kargi. This building served as a kind of school where the boys learned the laws from the men who came each evening to talk over the day's affairs and to make or repair hunting equipment. While they worked, the boys watched, and in that way learned how to make their tools and weapons, as well as how to use them. There also, the tribal historians would tell them the traditions of their tribes. When the evening was spent, the men would retire to their homes, and the boys would either dance or play games until late at night, after which they would all go to bed in the kagri. The system was very successful, as long as the men were in the village, but sometimes, when they would go away on a long walrus hunting trips, the boys who were left alone often got into mischief. And it so happened at Wales long years ago, when that village still bore the native name of Kingen. The men were all away from the village, and the Kagri boys had banded together, bent on mischief, under the leadership of a very bad fellow. A little girl happened to pass the Kagri just at the time, and the boys caught her and abused her in such a manner that she ran screaming to her grandmother with whom she lived alone. Oh, God. That's kind of like my job. So I was not expecting this. When the grandmother learned what had happened, she was furious and determined to punish the boys in a way that they would never forget. That evening, using the dark oil of the seal oil lamp for a mirror, the old woman began to paint her face in the most hideous manner. When she had finished, she turned around to the girl who was still crying, saying, "There, that will scare them, won't it?" "Oh, no, no," cried the little girl. "That will only make them laugh." Thereupon the old woman rubbed ashes into her hair and soot on her face. Again finished, she turned around and asked, "Will this scare them?" "No, no, you can never scare them. You don't know those boys," cried the little girl. The old grandmother tried again and again to make herself look terrifying, but at each attempt, the little girl told her that it would be of no use. Finally, the old woman went into the corner. There she undressed and, taking a sharp knife, began to cut long gashes in every part of her body. Then she got down on her knees and elbows and crawled out of the corner towards the little girl. Blood dripping from every cut made the body unrecognizable. When the little girl looked up, she gave a scream of terror. "Will that scare them?" asked the old woman. "Yes," said the girl. "I know that you will scare them now." It was almost dark. The old woman crept down towards the kaggi. Inside, the boys were singing and dancing. Among them was a younger boy who stayed there because his parents were dead. His name was Amizuk, and he was the only boy who had not abused the little girl. Amizuk happened to go outside just as the old woman came in sight, and he wondered what it could be he saw creeping towards the kagri. He was a little uneasy about it, so running inside, he said to the other boys, "Do not sing so loud. There's something coming." But the boys only mocked him, and changing their song, sang, "Amizuk tuk suk lomonovikta, Amizuk tuk betikan kuliktaka gana." The English song would go something like this. "Amizuk is telling lies, Amizuk is telling lies, Amizuk go out and climb a cache." You guys know a cache is like that thing we make to dry meat. When they had finished the song, Amazuk went out again and met the old woman face to face, although he did not recognize her as a human being. Terrified, he ran into the room, calling to the boys, "Stop singing! There is an Inuit outside. It walks on its elbows and knees and has eyes on its shoulders." But the boys only shamed him for being afraid of the dark and sang about him again. The frightened boys started out to take another peep, but when he opened the inner door, there was a ghost already in the storm shed. Honey Chuck. Amazuk slammed the door shut and ran into a corner. Then he put his little fingers in his mouth, bit them, and then stuck them into a crack in the wall. Immediately, the crack closed on his fingers and held them fast. The door rattled a little, and the boys stopped singing and looked towards it. Slowly, it opened, and in crept a terrible, bloody thing. The boys could not take their eyes from it, neither could they utter a cry. They were as if stricken dumb and almost senseless from fright. The ghost crawled slowly around the room into a wide circle. Some of the boys got down and crawled around behind it. Around it went again. More boys got down on their knees and elbows and followed helplessly. A third time, the ghost circled the room, and this time, the rest of the boys got down and crawled behind it. All were crawling now, except Amazuk, whose fingers were still held fast in the crack. 3 more times, the ghost circled the room, trying to get the remaining boy to follow, but he held fast. Then, giving him up, the ghost slowly crawled out through the door, with all the bad boys following on their elbows and knees. Across the tundra, it crawled and up the mountainside until lost in the darkness. The following morning, the men returned to the village. One man, passing the kagi, shouted, "Boys, why aren't you having your morning dance?" Amazuk called to him, and the man came in to see what was the matter. The poor boy was still hanging to the wall, and the wall had to be cut away before they can get his fingers loose. "Where are the boys?" asked the man. "They were taken away by a ghost," answered Amazuk. When the people of the village heard what had happened, they followed the tracks of the ghost and the boys through the snow. High up in the mountainside, they came upon the bodies of the boys, each one just a short distance behind the other, and all of them frozen to death. Those bodies were never buried, for each one turned into solid stone, and there you will still may see them on the mountainside, just behind the village of Wales, an old and silent reminder of what might happen to that kind of boys. The next story is called Why Old Squaw Ducks Are Everywhere. One springtime many years ago, 2 old squaw ducks came flying into the Northland. They flew like arrows, and the wind whistled through their tail feathers as they went. They flew into the North Pacific, and from there they entered the cold Bering Sea country. Then the female duck said to her mate, "Let us stop here and make our nest." "No, not yet. Let's go a little farther," answered the male, and on they went. When they had reached the Bering Straits, the female duck spoke again. "Let us stop here and make our home," she begged. "Just a little further, mate," urged the male. So on they flew, whistling through the air like arrows. They entered the Arctic Ocean and flew on until they reached Cape Espenberg. just where the Arctic Circle first touches Alaska on the west. "We must stop here," cried the female duck, "for I am almost ready to lay my eggs." This time her mate agreed. Down they swooped to earth, and in the grass close to the beach began to make a little nest. When it was finished, the female duck laid 5 pale green eggs in it. Their eggs are really cute. Several weeks later, all hatched out together, and the mother duck led her 5 little ducklings down to the sea. Then she swam out into the water, and the ducklings followed her. When they reached deep water, the mother duck suddenly dived into the sea and never came up again. The 5 little ducklings cried for their mother, for they were afraid, but it was no use. They never saw her again. Finally, the strongest of the 5 ducklings dived into the water in search of the lost mother. He swam until the water began to get very calm and shallow. At last, he rose to the surface and found himself in the center of a large, still lagoon. "This is just the place for me," he thought, so he searched no further, but remained thereupon in the lagoon. The 4 other ducklings waited and waited for him to come back. Then the second duckling dived into the water and began to swim with all his might. It happened that he got started in a southerly direction, and as he went, the water steadily became rougher and the current swifter. The sea began to narrow down, and at last, when the little duck came to the surface, he saw a point of land running out into the sea. He was at the Cape Prince of Wales on Bering Straits. Being pleased and fascinated by the rough waves and swift water, he decided that this would be his home. 3 little ducklings were left at Cape Espenberg. They paddled round and round, crying and waiting for the return of their mother and brothers. At last, one little duck dived into the water and began to swim to the southwest. The water got rough and the current grew strong, but the brave little duck swam straight through the swift water and finally came to the surface in a quiet little bay near Kist Ape, Siberia. He didn't know it, but he was just across the straits from his brother. But there was plenty of food for ducks here, so he made his mind to stay. 2 very worried little ducks remained at Cape Espenberg. They could not imagine what had become of the rest of the family. They cried and cried, but at the end, one of them dived into the water and began to swim. The farther he swam, the colder the water became. Then it grew dark as night. The little duck was swimming under thick, solid ice. At last he came to an open place, and there he was, in the very center of the Arctic Ocean. This cold, lonely place seemed to appeal to him, so he made it his home, and he has lived there ever since. One little duckling was left all alone at the Cape. His mother and all his brothers had deserted him, so there was nothing for him to do but dive into the sea and hunt for them. Why the fuck not? You're the only fucker left. Unless it's so fucking cool there, I would try to go somewhere else. So down he went. Goddamn. So down he went and then began to swim as fast as he could. On and on he went, looking here and there for his lost mother and brothers. At last, far ahead, he saw a dim light. He swam on until the light seemed to be directly overhead. So up he came to see what it was. It was only the sun, but instead of being low in the sky as it was at the Cape, it was right above him. This little duck liked the warmth and brightness of the sun, so he decided to stay right there and make his home. So this is why the Eskimos say that we have old squaw ducks in every bay and lagoon, in rough water and in smooth, from the ends to the center of the Arctic Ocean, and no doubt every other place under the sun. The next story is called The Raven Skin Parka. Once, long ago, 3 brothers lived all by themselves. The youngest of them was very much pampered because his mother and father were dead, and everybody felt sorry for him. Consequently, he grew more stubborn, cross, and selfish every day. In order to keep him contented, the older brothers decided to make him a raven skin parka. This pleased him very much, for a raven skin parka was very unusual in their village. But when the parka was almost completed, it was found they lacked just a single raven skin to finish it. When the little boy heard this, he hurried down to the beach to look for another raven, for he was impatient to wear his new parka. At the edge of the village, he saw one feeding all by itself. It was tame. It was no trouble to catch and kill it. But he had hardly done so and was starting home with it when he saw an old man coming towards him, acting as if he had lost something and was searching for it. When the old man saw the raven in the boy's hands, he cried out in a beseeching voice, "Please give me my raven!" Tulugak. That's the Eskimo or Inuit word for raven. Tulugak. "It's not your tulgak," snapped the boy. "I found it on the beach." "Yes, that is my tulgak. I lost it only today," said the old man. "Please let me have it." "No, you can't have it," returned the selfish boy. "I need it myself, for there are not enough tulgak skins to finish my parky." Thereupon the old man became angry and said, "I warn you, young man, if you do not give me my tulgak, something terrible will happen to you." "Well, you can't have it," returned the boy as he started home. "Very well," called the old man. "Keep it if you wish, but if you do, you will walk only a short way, and then you'll sit down and say, 'Ansugota tuktunga.' You can't frighten me," returned the boy. And on he went, taking the raven with him. Tulgak with him. But before he had gone half the way home, he began to feel very tired. His knees became weak and his limbs began to tremble so much that he was obliged to sit down and rest. Hardly had he sat down when he said in a startled voice, "Asugotakutua." He had spoken in English, his words would have been, "I am getting old." After his rest, the boy got up and tried to walk, but his legs were too weak to bear his weight. He could barely crawl now, so he crawled and crawled on his knees and elbows until he reached his igloo. Not having strength to open the door, he called to his brothers, "Open the door! Open the door!" The brothers heard the voice and ran to see who it was. "Pull me in! Pull me in!" cried the boy feebly. "I am your brother." "No, you are not our brother," said the young men. "Our brother is a little boy, but you are a feeble old man." But they took him in anyway, and the boy began to tell what had occurred since he left in search of a raven. While he was telling the story, he grew older and more wrinkled. His hair turned gray and then snow white, and his voice sounded faint and distant. He at last convinced his brothers that he was their younger brother. But during the course of the story, he had grown so old that hardly had the story ended when he died of old age. Poor guy. Anatok, I guess is what you'd say. That's how we say, "Oh, poor you," in Inuit. Anatok. One day, when the young brother-in-law was working in the mountainside, the evil spirit came up behind him and shoved him over a rocky bluff, killing him instantly. This young man had an older brother who was a medicine man. However, this brother kept his profession a secret, so nobody knew anything about his great power. The evil spirit had tried many times to end the brother's life, too, but his plots had been discovered each time. One time, when this medicine man was out on the ice hunting for seal with a friend, the evil spirit of the dead man took the form of a polar bear and had attacked him. The medicine man fought so hard that he beat the bear off and drove him away. After the encounter, he had happened to see something dark lying upon the ice. Upon picking it up, he was astonished to find that it was his ear. He felt the sides of his head to see which ear was missing, and finding the right place, stuck the ear back on. I don't think it works like that. But when he did so, he suddenly became cross-eyed. Naku! In fact, he was so cross-eyed that he was ashamed to go home to his family. Yeah, it'd be hard to find them if you're cross-eyed. Turning to his friend with whom he had been hunting, the medicine man said, "I'm ashamed to go home like this. You go home and tell my children that I was carried away on the ice. But don't go inside the igloo. Just shout to them through the window and they will hear you." The friend said that he would do as the medicine man wished, and bidding him farewell, started towards the land. No sooner had he gotten out of sight than the medicine man plunged into the water through a crack in the ice. The next story is called Mr. Raven and the Squirrel Hunter. Mr. Raven woke up very hungry one morning and started off across the tundra in search of a dead caribou that he could eat. After walking all day without finding anything, he climbed a hill so that he could look all around the surrounding country. There was nothing dead in sight, but in the distance he saw a small igloo and went toward it. When Mr. Raven approached the igloo, he tiptoed up to the window and peeped in. Nobody was there, but in the middle of the floor was a seal oil lamp, and over it hung a pot of squirrel meat cooking. He was so hungry that he went inside and helped himself to the squirrel meat. He ate and ate until his stomach was so full he had to take his regular afternoon nap. I get it. Everyone gets the lunchtime nappies. While he was sleeping, the owner of the igloo, who was a squirrel hunter, came home. As he came to the open door, he looked and exclaimed, "Oh! Somebody has come from someplace." Okay. Then he went inside, and Mr. Raven awoke as he entered. "My, but I am hungry," said the man to Mr. Raven. "Come, sit down with me and have some squirrel meat." "Oh, no, thanks," said Mr. Raven. "I haven't eaten meat in a long time." No, can ravens? Okay, whatever. I've never met a vegan raven, just saying. "Oh, no, thanks," said Mr. Raven. "I haven't eaten meat for a long time. In fact, my stomach is shrinking. That is why I cannot eat meat." So the man sat down and ate his supper. When he was through eating, he put his table away and began to skin squirrels. Then Mr. Raven hopped around in front to watch him work. "Get away from here," shouted the man. "You have 8 feet." "Oh, no, I haven't," said Mr. Raven. "I have only 2 feet like a man. Let us be friends and live here together." The squirrel hunter had to admit that at times he was lonely, so he agreed to let Mr. Raven stay. Every day the man went out and set snares to catch squirrels, and in the evening he would bring home his catch and skin them. But Mr. Raven did nothing at all. He sat around enjoying life and was always on time for his meals. At length the squirrel hunter began to feel that this was somewhat one-sided and spoke to Mr. Raven about it. "Now don't be angry, my friend," said Mr. Raven. "You go get me some pitch and also a good strong club." The man got the pitch and the club and brought them to Mr. Raven, who said, "Now, my friend, I want you to invite the spotted seals to dance." So the squirrel hunter went down to the sea and invited the seals to come up to dance. So I think the nutchicks, they call them. When he returned, a great many of them followed him to the igloo. When Mr. Raven saw all the spotted seals, nutchicks, I think, he felt very glad. Then he told them to get ready for the big dance. Soon they were all dancing and having a gay time. Then Mr. Raven stopped the dance and said, "Now we will have the big surprise. Everybody close your eyes. Don't open them until I tell you ready." When all the eyes were closed, Mr. Raven took pitch and poured it on their eyelids. Then he shouted, "Ready!" And the squirrel hunter seized his club and killed them all. Not one got away because they couldn't open their eyes. "Now, my friend," said Mr. Raven when all the seals were dead, "there are 2 ways to get meat and hides, so don't call me lazy anymore. I may not have hands like a man, but I can work with my head." So those are my stories for today. So tired. I hope everyone's having an awesome year. What the fuck should I say? I'm not. Well, I hope you guys are all doing well. And bye.